to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I here once again to continue breaking down all of the playoff matchups that are incoming. We're not sure when. We're not even sure if. I guess there is always the chance that it doesn't actually happen, but we're gonna keep our positive self in here, and we're gonna assume that yes, this is all gonna happen. It's gonna happen how we want it to. Everyone's gonna stay safe, and that's at this point, why not just assume everything's gonna be good? Because that's my hope. Justin, the 6 and 11 seeds are two pretty good matchups, I'd say. We'll start with the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. The Carolina Hurricanes ranked 6th. The Rangers ranked 11th. And a team that we said all year wouldn't make the playoffs. Of course, they're in the playoffs. And Carolina, though, looking for, I guess, some revenge, a rematch, because they lost all 4 games to the New York Rangers, going 0-4 through 4 games this year.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is a series that I'm probably most excited to see more than anyone in this play-in series here of 5 games, just because I think the Rangers, they're a team that nobody really expected to make any waves. I think they were kind of like in this weird rebuilding window, and then sort of got hot. You know, Zibanejad just came out of nowhere, and he's this electric, number 1 center that maybe, I mean, you and I maybe pegged as like a 1B number 2 center on any other team. And
he still is.
Yeah. And of course, Artemi Panarin right now, you got to talk about him as, a potential Hart Trophy candidate. And so this team came on really, really strong towards the end of the season. They kind of battled their way up towards the standings. And it would have been interesting to see, them finish out the season where they may have ultimately landed. But and then Carolina, of course, we know from last year, those jerks, they're exciting to watch. So this will be a really, really fun series.
Yeah. I mean, well, we'll start and break this down positionally as we did with the previous with the, what was it, 5-12. I'm trying to put my my March Madness hat on. We get the 5-12, the 6-11. So for the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Oilers and the Blackhawks, we broke it down by position. And if you haven't heard that episode, it's our last episode. We go back, subscribe to the show, listen to that one. It's a good one, but let's start at the goaltending position, where we kind of have this like Hall of Fame, one of the greatest goaltenders of his era playing for the Rangers, and then the ragtag bunch of goaltenders for the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, this one should be really interesting, especially when you look at the New York Rangers, right? I mean, they basically got a 3-headed monster back there. And I mean, you talked about one of them in particular, the king himself, Lundqvist, obviously, splitting time with the rest of these goaltenders. But towards the end of the season, I mean, we saw Shesterkin just take this team over. This is, I mean, unofficially, he's the goaltender of the future. I mean, there's no doubt about it at this point. He finished off the season through 12 games with a .932 save percentage and ultimately 10 wins through 12 games, which is pretty damn impressive. And, when you look at Alexander Georgiev, 17-14, and Lundqvist at 10-12 through the season, it leaves it a little bit of, controversy here. Who do you start come the playoffs? And I got to think that ultimately the Rangers do go with Henrik Lundqvist, the guy with the experience who's thrown this team on his back many times before and dragged them through the playoffs. I got to think they go to him, and, obviously Shesterkin's the guy to take over if maybe something doesn't go well through 2 or 3 games here. Yeah,
I think Georgiev, unfortunately, even though he did play really well, I think he just kind of finds himself as the odd man out here,
sure.
which probably is actually a good thing for him. He's going to get traded here in the offseason, I'm sure, and he will... he'll sign. He'll be an RFA, and he'll sign. He'll probably get a nice little raise from his $792,000 that he's making this year, and he will likely become a pretty decent starter. We'll see if he becomes more of the Cam Talbot type of ilk, or if he can be the Frederik Andersen. We'll see which one he ends up becoming. There's always that. Who are you going to become, the guy who can become a starter somewhere, or when push comes to shove, when you go to start somewhere else, do you falter? So, I mean, I guess Cam Talbot did have one good year, but Georgiev is yet another Rangers goaltender that finds a crowded crease here, and it's not even necessarily because of Lundqvist this time. It's because of Shesterkin, and so I agree. I don't think you can not start Lundqvist here. This is probably the final hurrah for Lundqvist, and I think that may provide enough motivation. He might be able to dig deep, find himself differently, and hey, one last hurrah here, because he's a UFA after the end of next year. But also, you consider that they shouldn't be in the playoffs. I mean, at least the way the standings finished. Of course, they were only 2 points back of Carolina. Carolina had games in hand, and there were other teams ahead of them as well, but they were only a couple points back. 1 point back of the Islanders, 2 points back of the Blue Jackets, 2 points back of the Hurricanes. So they certainly had an opportunity to move into a playoff spot, but it would have been a challenge, I think, when push came to shove down the stretch. It would have been a challenge. But we won't know, but I got to think no one was expecting at the beginning of the year that this team would be in the playoffs. So why not go Lundqvist one last time? And I mean, the other thing that we're not thinking about necessarily is that this is only a 5-game first-round series. So if you have 2 bad games, the series is over for the most part. It's not going to be. I think the rope might be shorter. Like if Lundqvist goes in and let 5 goals in game 1, he might be out.
Yeah, absolutely. That would not surprise me in the least bit. And I got to say, the same is probably shared with the Carolina Hurricanes as well. I mean, you got to look at, who they have in net as well. I think, you've got Peter Mrazek and James Reimer back there, and 2 guys that obviously Mrazek's your go-to guy starter, but I think one bad game and it's right back to Reimer.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, just knowing what Reimer had to go through in that Game 7, and a lot of people blamed him for what happened. I mean, he was partially to blame, of course, but I'm talking, of course, 2013 against the Bruins when he was the Maple Leaf. I would like to see some redemption for James Reimer. I really think that he truly is one of the good guys in this sport, and it would be really good to see if he does get the opportunity to play. I would love to see kind of a revival story out of James Reimer. It'd be nice to see, but I would assume that Peter Mrazek will be the starter until he
gets injured again.
Well, sure, yeah, that's the other side of it. We didn't even talk about injuries to Lundqvist, but who knows? I mean, he's you're not able to skate, you're not able to do the same things that you'd normally do in an off season as a goaltender, which this is essentially an off season. It's an even longer one. And you got to wonder for Henrik Lundqvist, who's 38 years old, what kind of toll is this going to have on him? I mean, on his body. You might think that the rest is good, but also with rest comes rust. and
well put.
And I think that there could be some irreshakable. That's my new word. Some irreshakable rust. When you're that old and you need to be incredibly flexible and fast, and you've had injury problems, I truly think this might be the final hurrah for Henrik Lundqvist. But
yeah, this will be interesting. I mean, you've got 2 teams essentially that score a lot of goals. They're both in the top 11 here, so this should be fun for the goaltenders.
Yeah, New York Rangers top 5 in goals for per game, so they're. They are scoring more than you'd think. Like, I don't think that anybody was thinking, the Rangers are going to score the lights out, but they really have. They've been fantastic. Defensively, though, I think this is where we start to see a separation in talent. You don't have to look further than the Rangers trading away one of their top 4 D-men to Carolina, Brady Shea, at the deadline, to know, hey, the defense in New York, well, it is young and certainly like an Adam Fox and Anthony DeAngelo and Jacob Trouba, Jacob Trouba is 26 years old. He's not young anymore in terms of playing age. They have some nice pieces, really great defensemen, like guys who I think will be very good for a long time. But holy mackerel, the Carolina Hurricanes were expecting Dougie Hamilton and Brett Pesce both to be out for the year. Now they get Dougie Hamilton back, and it's looking like Brett Pesce might be back. He might not make it back for this round, but who cares? Because you have Jacob Slavin, Brady Shea, Jake Gardner, Joel Edmondson, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Hayden Fleury, along with Dougie Hamilton. Oh, and Sammy Vatanen will be coming back as well. They also have Jake Bean in the minors, who did very well. And so, I mean, if there was an overload of injuries, they do have another player to pull up onto their pro roster if that happened. As far as I can tell, this team has 10 NHL defensemen. I mean, Jake Bean, if he's on almost any other team, I think he's at least on the bottom pairing. But in Carolina, he's in the minors. And he's nowhere close to getting up because there's so many players ahead of him on the depth chart. I mean, there is a chance. I mean, I think Hayden Fleury, he's probably the odd man out. Trevor Van Riemsdyk as well. But there's a chance that if enough of these guys can all come back, like Jake Gardner might not even be playing. He might be benched. I really don't know who is guaranteed a spot outside of, I think Slavin, Shea, and Hamilton and Vatanen will all be, if they're all healthy, they'll be in the lineup. That's really all I could say that I'd guarantee. And then Pesce if he were to come back.
Yeah, this will definitely be interesting for the Carolina Hurricanes because, of course, now you have this abundance of defensemen, and you've been basically rotating guys all year long throughout your lineup due to injuries and new acquisitions. So, finding the right combination of guys to work with, whom on what side and what pairings, is going to be really interesting. Obviously, you already know what you're getting out of guys like Jacob Slavin and Dougie Hamilton, but as far as who meshes well with everybody else, it's going to be a free for all, I think. And I think the Hurricanes are going to have a lot of fun trying to figure out who works well with who. And obviously, when you look at the Rangers from this point of view, they got obviously Mark Stahl, who's a little older, a little slower, but has the experience. But then, there's the bevy of younger guys like Anthony D'Angelo and Adam Fox, guys that have never really been there and haven't really done much. So it'll be interesting to see really these matchups on D. And I'm also interested to see for the Rangers if Brendan Smith, of course, former Red Wing, what they do with him, if they actually let him play at defense or if they throw him back on the wing on the fourth line there.
Yeah, I mean, in this 5-game series, I don't think I'm worried about experience. I mean, if you think about it, no one in the NHL right now has experience in a 5-game series in the NHL. I think there's a 5-game series in the AHL.
There is the first round. Yeah.
But as far as the NHL competition goes, there hasn't been a 5-game series since the early 80s. Right?
Yeah.
It's the early 80s, I think they had the 5-game series. So.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be advantageous for Carolina too, because if you get guys that, maybe, like you said, have a little bit more rust, Carolina has the advantage to throw other guys in, right? To keep guys a little bit maybe more rested or, maybe give them more time to get their legs back underneath them, whereas, the Rangers have to go with what they have and hope it works.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where maybe there is definitely a skill advantage in Carolina's favor and the amount of bodies that they have that they could put back there if they suffered injuries. But how much are injuries really going to play a factor in these 5-game series? I'm sure that someone will go down with an injury in some of these series, but not to the extent that we maybe have seen in the past because players are so rested. They're not going to come in with the same kind of grind that they had to experience playing 82 games and then coming into the playoffs. This is a fresh start. So, I mean, of course you're going to see freak injuries, but you're not going to see those wearing down of a player type of like, oh, this guy just needs 2 weeks off because he's just so beaten down from the season. That just isn't going to be the case. I guess the advantage for the Rangers might be that, like you said, they know exactly who's going to play for them. And so there's no question. There's not going to be line juggling. There's not a who's going to gel with who type of question. And there's not the controversy of, hey, there's 3 or 4 of you who are legitimate NHL defensemen who are not going to play in the playoffs or not going to play every game. I think that's it'll be interesting to see, but ultimately I think I give the nod to the Hurricanes. Big advantage, especially after you get past the first 4 defensemen or so. I mean, and that can make a huge difference. I mean, those guys, instead of their top pairing having to play 25, 26 minutes, I mean, almost everybody can play between 18 and 22 minutes, and you're not going to see much of a drop in performance. Whereas for the Rangers, they're going to need to play some guys significantly more than others. So you may see a drop in performance there. Let's move up the lineup into the forward position, let's start with the New York Rangers. You talked a little bit about Zibanejad, so let's start at, I guess, the center position.
Yeah, you look down the middle, right? Obviously, Zibanejad, your number one, a 40-goal scorer this year, and amazingly, 41 goals through 57 games, which is just an incredible pace. So should be exciting to see what he can do, and especially considering he's not on a line most of the time with our Temi Panarin. So, but then when you go a little bit further down the lineup for the Rangers, you start to look at their center depth past him, and that's when it gets a little bit shaky. Obviously, they've got Ryan Strome there, who's cemented himself, I think, as their number 2 center. But, outside of that, you got guys like Craig McCraig and, Brett Howden, and you start question marks, right? Like, what are you going to get out of these guys come playoff times? And I think, obviously you're going to see Zibanejad and Strome out there for, easily, I think, 20, 18 minutes apiece for both those guys. And you're going to see.
Have to.
Yeah, you're not going to see much time out of the third and fourth guys here. So, it'll be really, can the third and fourth line guys chip in just a little bit when they get the opportunity, but can, a guy like Ryan Strome hold down the fort on that second line? Because when you have to pair up against, whatever pairing you get on defense from Carolina, which is going to be phenomenal either way, it'll be interesting to see what they get.
Yeah, I think when I look at both these forwards, the forward groups, obviously you love Sebastian Aho. I mean, my first thought is to immediately go Aho versus Panarin. Like there's your 2 best players. I know Aho mostly plays at center, Panarin exclusively on that left side. They're probably going to see a lot of each other, is my guess. Either that, or you're going to have Jordan Staal be all right, go shut down Zibanejad, Panarin, and take Vince Trocheck with you. I mean, we didn't really get to see a whole lot out of Trocheck as a Carolina Hurricane. So I do think that's yet another. I mean, in 7 games, he did only have 2 points. So he didn't exactly shine, but it's kind of a moot point. We know what we're going to get from Vince Trocheck. He can score goals. He's going to score goals. And I think during this time, they probably have had a lot of opportunities to figure out where to place him and how he fits into the lineup a little bit better. But when I consider, hey, you got Trocheck, Staal, Aho, and then even down into the bottom 6 with the Jordan Martinook and Martin Nikas, like they have some guys that can play center in the bottom 6, which is where I see the big advantage for the Hurricanes is once you get outside the Rangers' top 6, there is a significant drop off. And the Hurricanes have some guys who can score in their bottom 6.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you talked about it a little bit, right? Obviously, Vincent Trocheck coming over from Florida at the deadline. And so he's going to be kind of looked at to anchor, I think, that second line. And you're going to see Jordan Staal more as a shutdown guy against, the top scorers for the Rangers. But again, when we talk about the bottom 6, right, we look at guys that I think can be difference makers. And one of those big names is Justin Williams. I think, obviously the big talk was him getting a lot of rest coming back later in the season, but now he gets even more rest. And for a guy, a little bit up there in age, still 11 points through the 20 games he played, not bad production for a third line guy. And so you're going to see a lot of him playing those third line minutes. And then of course, obviously right now towards the end of the season, they had Nino Niederreiter in that bottom 6. Whether or not he stays there, or whether he moves up will be one thing. And then, of course, another guy, Warren Fogle, who can obviously make an impact and score a goal here or there. So, again, I agree with you. I think Carolina's bottom six is really where you're going to see the difference. If Carolina's going to win the series, I think their ability to score goals when they're not matching up those top two lines will be critical.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who can kind of step up for the Rangers. Obviously, you're looking at a guy like Capo Kaiko. I mean, it'd be great if you could get some extra production out of him after only scoring 10 goals in his rookie season, which in my mind is a disappointment. Like he hasn't been great. He's been okay. He hasn't been awful, but I'd say that it's been disappointing. And a lot of times we see from season to season, a really young guy is able to kind of pull things together coming into the next year. So I would look to Capo Kaiko, Julian Gauthier in the AHL last year for the for the Charlotte Checkers. I'm sorry, in 44 games he had 26 goals. So a possible guy who could chip in the bottom six, who not a lot of people are looking to. He only played 12 games in the regular season, and they were flipped around, in different places. And so I think he may get an opportunity. And Philip Scheitel, maybe we'll see if he can kind of rise to the occasion as well. He had 60 games. He had 14 goals, and that's a good start, I guess, for a guy who, I mean, his rookie season was 2 years ago. He had 23 points in 75 games. He has the same amount of points. He's scoring a little bit more goals in fewer games. So I think he is a guy who's getting better. But it's this bottom six for the Rangers that I don't think can hang on against the Carolina Hurricanes. There's guys that I like down there, guys that could make a difference, but I just look at that the back defense for Carolina is so good. There's not going to be any point where it lets up. And there's so many puck movers. It's going to be really difficult for the Rangers, I think, to keep the puck out of their own zone and to gain possession in Carolina's end.
Yeah, and you look at the guy who's behind the bench for Carolina, right? Ron Francis. They go like this guy goes, and Rob Brendamore. And so they move like this guy, right? So he wants fast, he wants quick, he wants them to go full force all the time. And so they're going to need production out of Capo Caco, Brendan Lemieux, these guys in the bottom six, which I honestly just don't think they can keep up given what's on Carolina's back end. Okay,
so what is your prediction for this series?
I will take Carolina in 4 games.
Okay, I'm gonna go Carolina in 5. Mr. Game 7, he won't have the opportunity to play in a Game 7 because it's a best of 5, but he will score a goal in Game 5 and just continue to cement himself as one of the greatest elimination game players of all time. That's a very specific prediction, but you can take it to the bank.
All right.
Let's go on to our other 6-11 series. The Nashville Predators and the Arizona Coyotes, two teams that I think had somewhat of a disappointing season for both teams. Given what the Arizona Coyotes did in the offseason, bringing in Phil Kessel, trading for Taylor Hall, and signing Oliver Ekman-Larsson, there's just so many good things that have happened to this team, and it just seemed like they were there, but then they weren't. And of course, they're getting this opportunity. This is like their swan song here, because they probably weren't going to make the playoffs if when the season had started. They were quite a decent amount back, and things just weren't looking great. But here's their opportunity, and they go up against a team who I don't know if there was ever any risk of them really missing the playoffs, even though they were out of the playoffs at some points. But this is a team that sorely underperformed the Nashville Predators. So you've got two teams that essentially disappointed their fan base, but here they are playing each other. One of them is going to get to what do we call it? Just the quarterfinals? I guess that's what we're calling it.
The actual playoffs?
Yes. We'll call it the quarterfinals. I guess this is the play-in, the qualifying round, and then the first round is the quarterfinals. So one of these teams will make it in. let's start at the goaltending position. Let's go with the Nashville Predators.
All right. Yeah. Obviously, I think you know who's back there. Pekka Rinne, he's the guy they're going to go to. Unfortunately, kind of had, in like most of these Predators here, a sort of disappointing season. Only 18 wins and .895 save percentage, the worst of his career. 3.17 goals against. Obviously, those numbers aren't going to cut it for any team as a starter, but they've got UC Saros back there who's shown he can be a capable goaltender through 40 games, 914 and 2.7 goals against. So they've got a guy I think that obviously they want to be their future, but for right now, it's clear that Pekka Rinne is their goaltender. We've seen him do it in the playoffs many times. He can, much like Henrik Lundqvist, can put this team on his back and sort of drag them through a round or two. So we'll see if he can get it done again. Obviously hasn't got the ultimate prize, but this should be an interesting, I don't want to call it swan song for him as well, but I think he's opened the door and sort of stepping out. So, not too many more games left for this guy. So we'll see if he can't maybe put some sort of miracle together and, put together a good playoff run here.
Yeah, he's really struggled the last 2 years in the playoffs. He's allowed 52 goals in 19 games in his last 19 games, and that's through 2 years of the playoffs. So he's allowed more than 3 goals a game over that stretch. Nashville hasn't made it out of the second round since 2016-17, when, of course, he took them to the finals and was absolutely fantastic with a 196 goals against average and 93 save percentage. Hasn't really had other playoff runs like that. Maybe one other one in 2011-12 when Nashville went to the second round. But it seems to me like Pekka Rinne, this probably going to be it for Pekka Rinne in my mind. I mean, yes, he has one more year left on his contract. The next year is going to be like Juicy Saros is getting the majority of the starts, or at least he's going to get 41 starts, somewhere around there. You got to go and see if this guy is somebody that you can rely on. And I think that if Pekka Rinne has one bad game in the playoffs, they'll turn to Saros. They have to. In a 5-game series, you have no choice.
Yeah, the leashes are short. There is no doubt about it. And then when you look on the flip side, right, we kind of had the opposite for the Arizona Coyotes. We've got 2 goaltenders in Antti Rautanen and Darcy Kempner who have been playing phenomenal, right? Great numbers. Unfortunately, neither one of these guys really have any playoff experience. Antti Rautanen, his only playoff experience in 15-16 with the Rangers, only played 3 games. And then, of course, Darcy Kempner got 3 years of playoffs in, but only a total of 9 games with the Minnesota Wild through 2012 and 2015. So not much experience, but I think given that this was Kepner's team towards the end of the year, I think he's the guy to go to right now. But, again, you've got 2 great goaltenders, 2 good options, and you can't go wrong with either one, I don't think.
Yeah, and, the other, when you're a team like Arizona, I think Dallas is sort of in a similar position. I think there's several teams in the league right now that maybe these 5 games they're going and saying to their goaltenders, hey, look, like we're gonna play you on night 1 and we're gonna play you on night 2, and we're just gonna see who looks ready. I mean, I think there's a chance that these guys might split time through the first 2 games. I think there's a chance. The other side of it would be that you might need to just pick a guy and run with him because it's so short. But it'll be interesting to see the strategy. I think you might have some guys who are happy to share the net. They've been sharing the net all year, so why stop now? But there are, of course, that mindset of, all right, it's playoff time. You give the net to one goalie and one goalie only. But it's just worked so well in the regular season that I don't know if you need to do that because you have 2 fantastic goalies in Arizona.
Yeah, I think if you come out and you win game 1, if you're Arizona, I think why not, right? Give it a try. If maybe, Darcy Kempner doesn't play too good, but he plays all right, you can easily go, okay, well, let's give Rautanen a try and see if he does any better. See if he maybe really comes in hot and is looking like he's ready to steal this series. So maybe again, if you win game 1 and have that opportunity, why not, right? Because you mentioned it, you've been doing it all year long. You've had these goaltenders splitting the net all year, so why not roll with what's worked for you all year?
Yeah. Okay, let's move forward. Let's. I would say last thought about the goaltenders. Who are you thinking has? Are we thinking Arizona probably has that advantage in goal?
Yeah, I would probably give it to him just based on the play that I've seen from this season. I mean, any other year would probably say Pekka Rinne, but he just has not looked anywhere near like himself this season. And so for right now, and this might be a good thing for Rinne too. You know, this long restart is maybe given an opportunity to really, refocus, get some rest, and say, okay, I'm going to go out there and play a little differently or try some new things and maybe hit the restart button.
Okay. Now, I think some of the reason that goaltending is so good, especially for the Arizona Coyotes, is not just their defense, as in the 6 guys who play on the back end. I think it's just a total team defense. Like, they are committed to playing a certain way. They don't give up a lot of opportunities, and that results in their goaltenders having very good statistics. And so I'm wondering, when it comes to defense now, when we look at these two teams, obviously Nashville has the best defenseman as well as probably the best player in this whole series in Roman Josi.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't disagree with you more. I think he obviously is going to be the go-to guy for either team when you talk about the number one shutdown D, and he's gonna easily see 25 minutes a game. I mean, he led this team in points. He led this team in basically everything, and there's a reason why you still get whispers of him being considered not only for a Norris but for a Hart Trophy right now. And so what he's meant to this team is incredible. He's obviously just such a good quality defenseman. It's going to be no surprise even if I see him playing 30 minutes a game.
Yeah, nobody's shocked when he plays that much. I mean, then you compound it the fact that you also have Ryan Ellis, you also have Matthias Ekholm. This team is very top heavy on defense, but they are fantastic. Maybe after those 3 guys, it kind of starts to waver a little bit, but you could almost put anyone you want with Roman Josi, and it doesn't really matter. He's just that dominant. I'd say though that the Arizona Coyotes have maybe a little bit better depth, but definitely not the same high end. Like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, very good defenseman, not Roman Josi. Nicholas Hjalmarsson having a better year this year, definitely not Ryan Ellis. And Goligoski is definitely not Ekholm, although Goligoski, he's got lots of experience. I believe he's won a cup, right? He won a cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins, right?
I believe so. You are correct.
Yeah, he did. So I mean, you have some nice experience on this, and Jason Demers to a lesser extent, but I think when you consider the defense as a whole, this has to be the portion where Nashville needs to dominate, because Arizona is going to play this great team defense. Nashville is somewhat committed to that as well, but it really comes down to the play of their defense, as opposed to where Arizona is a little bit more of a full team effort when it comes to defense.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, you look at Arizona, one guy they're going to have back too that's going to even make that defense a little bit more formidable is Jacob Chychrun. He should be healthy and ready to go. But when you look at the way Arizona plays a team defensive game, what I'm excited to see is, do they let, the leashes go on guys like Taylor Hall and Phil Kessel and say, go out there and score some goals? Because these are 2 guys, they definitely brought in because they, have not had a lot of playoff success when it comes to scoring goals. And so, this team obviously is trying to beat you 2-1, but I think it'll be interesting to see, especially in a 5-game series, do they let guys like Kessel and Hall get the opportunity to go out there and maybe try to put a couple more pucks in the back of the net?
Yeah. I mean, and other guys that I look to as well. I mean, you've got Clayton Keller, who only scored 17 goals this year. Again, the guy just got paid $7 million, and he got 44 points, 47 the year before. I mean, he went from having a 65-point rookie season and 23 goals, and he's only had 31 goals in his last 152 games. Clayton Keller is someone who, we've got to see something different from him. I mean, it's not for a lack of trying to set him in the right position. I mean, he's got offensive zone starts in the last 2 years. He's started his offensive zone starts 66.8 and 62.5% the last 2 years. I mean, it's not for a lack of putting him in the right spot. He's just really he's not producing, and it's not even it's not a shooting percentage issue either. I mean, he shot 10.8% in 2017-18. He shot 9.2% this last year, 7% last year, or the year before. So maybe that's a down year, but 9.2%. I mean, you're just not shooting enough. If that's the case, I mean, he's an above average shooter, but he's just not shooting enough. He only has 17 goals. He might have had 18 or 19 if we had gone the full season. But I'm looking, and Clayton Keller's going to need to score some goals. Kessel has to score goals. I mean, he's been atrocious for this team. Not to mention, Taylor Hall hasn't exactly lit up the lamp since getting there. I mean, Kessel only scored 14 goals, whereas Taylor Hall, after coming over from New Jersey, he's got 10 goals in 35 games, so a little bit better than Kessel. But man, that's the difference, right? Is Kessel, Hall, and Keller. There's your highest paid players, at least starting next year. I know Clayton Keller's only paid $885,000 this year, but if those guys can't produce, you're not going to win this series.
Yeah, and part of me obviously wonders if Arizona's planning on trying to get, because this has been the biggest issue in Arizona for so long, is their lack of a number one center, right? And so you wonder if maybe they're paying Keller to say, hey, we're going to give you this money because we think once we get a center, you're going to explode, and then it's going to be a bargain on our part. But at the same time, what about right now? Right, obviously, right. You're paying a guy to score right now, and as highly touted as he was, he hasn't really lived up to the hype, especially coming out of that rookie season where he just sort of exploded out of the gate and then sort of slowed down. So, but you talk about disappointments, and then I shift our focus over to Nashville now, and I look at all these big names they have at the fourth position: Philip Forsberg, Matt Duchene, Ryan Johansson, Michael Granlund. You could even throw a guy like Kyle Turris' name in there, and none of these guys on this team have cracked the 50-point mark this season. The only guy on the team to do it is Roman Josi.
Is your defenseman.
Your defenseman, yeah.
And as a defenseman, the only players that have scored more goals than him: Philip Forsberg, Nick Bonino, Craig Smith, and Michael Granlund.
Exactly. Yeah, you have one 20-goal scorer on this team, and Philip Forsberg, and that's where you look at it, right? You look at a team, and granted, I know they swapped coaches this season and everything like that, but still, for a team that has so many high-end, star power names up front, I expect a lot more from this team. And so that's going to be the biggest concern for me if I'm the Nashville Predators, is what team are you going to get? Are you going to get, the team from a couple years ago where you said these guys are Stanley Cup favorites, or are you going to get the team of today that I just look at them like, I don't know if they're going to get out of this preliminary round.
Yeah, so. I mean, I don't think you have to look further than a guy like Victor Arvidsson, who went from back-to-back 61-point seasons. He averaged 30 goals a year between those 2 years. And then even last year, he scores 34 goals in 58 games. And then this year, in 57 games, he has 15 goals.
Yeah, everything's down for this team.
I know he was a little banged up. He has been a little bit banged up since the end of last year. I think he hurt his knee. Right?
Yeah, I think so.
But I know that he got hurt. So maybe this is exactly what Victor Arvidsson needs, is this time off to fully recover from whatever's going on. He has to score goals for Nashville. The guy was a 30 goal scorer basically 3 years in a row outside of a 29 goal season in there. They have to put up points. I'd say Philip Forsberg, well, he didn't put up a ton of points. He was fine in 63 games, 48 points. I mean, he was on pace for a 60-point season. It's not great, but it's not horrible. Whereas, I mean, Arvidsson, you're on pace for less than 40 points. Ryan Johansson, you're on pace for 45 points. Duchene, the guy you just signed to bring in that extra offense from the center position, he only had 42 points. So, I mean, you're looking at maybe a 50-point season. But I just feel like, that's not what you were looking for at all. I mean, Duchene went and had 70 points the year before, and he's here and he's barely scratching the surface of 50. That's just not going to cut it.
Yeah. And I think it'll be interesting because Nashville is loaded down the center position with guys like, Johansson, Duchesne, Bonino, Kyle Turris. So they've, Michael Granlund even playing the wings right now can play center, but they've got options there. So if guys aren't cutting it, they can mix and match guys really quick. So, and of course, and then when you talk about, special teams is another area to look at as well too. Nashville's been at the bottom for both penalty kill. I think power play, they were 25th, penalty kill, they were 29th. And so Arizona has a golden opportunity on special teams if they can get something going. Obviously, they know how to kill penalties in Arizona, but their power play was middle of the pack at best. And so they could really take advantage of a team that just hasn't cut it on special teams either.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now I'll say the one shining part for the Predators has been Nick Bonino, actually. I mean, Bonino, he was on pace to have his best year in 7 years. He would have likely scored 20 goals. He might have beat his career best. His career best is 22. He scored 18 in 67 games. So I think Nick Bonino is in a good spot. Like, he kind of had a couple. He didn't play as well last year, especially the first year that he was in Nashville, where he only had 25 points. Granted, I know in the playoffs he did okay 2 years ago, but and he does have the 2 Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh. So I think he is somebody to take a look at and go, he's having a better year this year. He's maybe found his place in Nashville. Maybe he already has been shifted up the lineup because Kyle Turris couldn't really get anything done and was benched at some different points. And so I think Bonino might be your like unknown secret weapon if he can come in and make a difference. Since Arizona really doesn't have a lot of depth up the middle, a guy like Bonino might get some opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's give me your prediction for this series. What's going to happen?
Yeah, this one's going to be interesting. I think I'm going to have to go Arizona with an upset, if you want to call it that, in 5 games.
Okay. I think that the Nashville Predators are going to pull this one out. I think that Roman Josi is the great equalizer. He is the best player in this series by a long shot. And I don't think that Nashville wins once they make it to the quarterfinals of these playoffs. But I do think Arizona, they've got some nice pieces. It just hasn't really looked like everyone fits. And I don't think a long break is just going to make that better. So I think the Nashville Predators are going to win this one. I'll say in 4 games. And by the way, these teams went 1-1 against each other, so we don't really have anything to work off there. So all right, well, that is your 6-11 preview. On the next show, we'll jump right ahead to the 7-10. 7-10. I gotta keep having to make sure that I'm saying the right numbers. We'll jump ahead to the 7-10s, so stay tuned for that, and continue following us on Twitter. Actually, side note, hey, here's a little update. We now have a website. You can go to othockeytalk.com. That has all of our show and information on there too. So if you're not sure which social media platform you want to follow us on, just go to othockeytalk.com. Justin, any final thoughts for our listeners?
No, none whatsoever.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Well, we'll talk to you guys soon, and stay safe out there.